to solving them. The various ministries in Lagos State have supported this effort, and a lot of those projects are now being mainstreamed into the budget for 2022. And then to round up, I will say that to achieve water resilience in Lagos, we need to move to a systems thinking approach and focus beyond the engineering solutions, which tend to be expensive, to leverage on indigenous knowledge systems. Lagos is a water city and has been so for 300, 400, 500 years. And so the local communities are able to survive. What can we learn from them that can be upscaled? We need to, like I said before, improve the capacity of local actors, especially the local governments, because indeed they are the closest to the people. And then with regards to adaptation, there is a need to focus on centralized solutions, like I said before, and more importantly on decentralized solutions. If there are 22 million people, one solution is not good enough. And finally, there is a need to ensure that the systems that we're building in adapting to the future, these systems must be fit for purpose. They must be co-created with the beneficiaries and users. They must be deployed at scale, and they must indeed leave no one behind. The engineering solutions must be decentralized, yes, and they must incorporate our local knowledge systems. And then there's a need for urban management. It's not enough to provide the infrastructure. It's also very important to maintain, to ensure that the right infrastructure is provided for the right community, and that management and sustainability plans are incorporated from the get-go. It is only when we have put all this together that we can say we're on the pathway to water resilience in Lagos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One thing that comes out strong there is any kind of system we put in place must be fit for purpose. Thank you very much. Is Dana ready? Yes. Thank you, sir. Yes. Thank you very much, Nana. We see so many pathways to follow, but we can also hold on to what you said. Our future is not what we thought it would be, but we can make it what we want. And we also need to build trusted relationships with government and with every partner and stakeholder. Thank you very much. And we'll call on Mr. Akpan, Mr. Anthony Akpan, the President Pan-African Vision for the Environment, enhancing the use of indigenous knowledge in climate change, mitigation, and adaptation in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I stand on all existing protocol. What we're actually proposing is actually a research proposal, because over time I've come to see that we tend to depend on foreign solutions to most of our challenges, and particularly in terms of climate change. So, and I think it is important we look inwards. And I think if we look back to history, we see that our indigenous people have always had a way of reading the season, knowing when to plant and not when to plant, though it has changed now. So I think it is important that we can tap into this traditional knowledge that are existing. So I'll just give some few background. Indigenous people from all regions of the world have an identity and culture that depends upon their natural environment. Their rich and detailed traditional knowledge reflects and embodies a cultural and spiritual relationship with the land, ocean, and wildlife. However, as human activity is changing the world's climate, it's altering the natural environment to which indigenous peoples are closely attached and on which they so heavily rely. Through their culture of intergenerational transmission of knowledge over thousands of years, indigenous peoples are unique repositories of learning and knowledge on successfully coping with local level climate change and effectively responding to major environmental changes such as natural disasters. So we see that all of these efforts have contributed to increasing the realization that the observation and assessment of indigenous peoples and local communities offer valuable in situ information, provide for local verification of global scientific models and satellite data sets, and ensure that adaptation measures align with local needs and priorities. So basically, this research proposal aims to identify, document, and use indigenous knowledge on climate change in Nigeria. Key objectives will include building bridges between former research areas' priorities in terms of knowledge gaps in adaptation and mitigation policy for local communities, and to have empirical evidence for local, state, and national advocacy work. It will also employ research findings to strategically engage decision makers at the national and state houses of assembly via knowledge sharing workshops on the need to use indigenous knowledge on climate change in policy planning and formulation. Also, some of the expected results from this research will include, we think if the research is undertaken, it will generate case studies that identify and conserve biodiversity, implement land, water, and soil management practices that are based on traditional indigenous knowledge. It will also help increase the resilience of indigenous people to climate threats. Innovative adaptation plans and communication strategies based on indigenous systems are designed to accelerate learning and knowledge sharing on climate change adaptation. It will also help identify operational pathways through which indigenous knowledge can contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation policy goals, highlighting which methods of engagement have proved effective, equitable, and describing some of the common pitfalls of engagement. make the experience of people available to their brothers and sisters communities in the hope that lessons learned by one community can be shared with many and they work to benefit all. So I think it's important we begin to look at some of this knowledge and begin to document them and begin to integrate them into our traditional, into our formal climate change action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we'll be able to go back to the time we used to use pots as our coolers for water if we want to go back to the indigenous times. We hope this research will help to build resilient communities, as you would find out from the data that may come out from the research. Thank you. So they will take the last person, and in no way the most is about the most important for me, because we're looking at women, the vulnerable, and climate change. And we'll talk to help us with this is Ms. Titi Lokwe Akusa.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, well, I would have loved to really dwell much on the vulnerability, but because the Honorable Commissioner for Women Affairs has spoken so much about vulnerability, and we all know that it is widely acknowledged that women are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and that we need to support women to adapt and to mitigate climate change. But what I want to really dwell on is much more about how are we turning our vulnerability into economic opportunities, and what are we doing moving away from vulnerability. There's one thing we all really need to know, that in the world we are now, as much as we want to respond to climate change, we still also want to do business. We want to see how sustainable we want to be. And so putting out vulnerability into the world, but vulnerability does not send a signal of business. So it's like, if you talk about women being vulnerable, then people say, yes, they are vulnerable, they need to be supported, then how do we become sustainable? So that is what we are looking at in my presentation. And for my organization, we are working with the Lagos State Ministry of Environment. Since last year, we have started training women on climate finance and the Green Climate Fund, and how they can access and benefit from all the climate finances, or whether it is called climate finance or whether it is called green finance. So last year we had 2 trainings. We had one in Lagos, we had one in Abuja, and we had another one in Port Harcourt. So how are we trying to support women to do more of this? What we are doing right now, this year we will be trying to set up what we call the Local Women Climate Finance. And this is the way it works. We want to see what are the solutions that women are bringing on the table, and how can we help them to build entrepreneurship around it, and how can we help them to get funding also to ensure that their ideas also become a big business for them, so that they can sustain their livelihoods. So once we get some of the solutions together from the local women, we pull it together, we put a costed plan to it, we get our climate finance strategy very much ready, and we will share it with the Director of Climate Change, which is the National Designated Authority for Nigeria, because when any funding is coming from the Green Climate Fund or any of the climate finance platforms, it goes through the NDA. So we've been working with the NDA, we will launch it, we will give it to the NDA, and so that any of the international accredited entities that wants to come into Nigeria, that want to do any proposals, we will be part of that proposal, and some of this funding will go to them. We go to our women, because already we are ready for it. We are doing our own readiness also. Also, we are also looking at working with the African Women Development Fund also to assess the Green Climate Fund, because the African Women Development Fund is a fund that is already well known, is very much established. It could get some of this funding on behalf of women, and once they get it on behalf of women, then they share it, because we also know that women do small businesses. Maybe some of the grants, some of it these women need is maybe $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. So, and their business starts and it's working for them. So we get a bigger organization to get the money on behalf of women, and then can distribute it on behalf of women. So the Center for 21st Century Issues is working with the African Women Development Fund, and they have funded us right now even to do a lot of this at the African women's level and amplify and strengthen the African women's voice so that we can get a lot of this climate finance funding. Because if you look at the way climate finance is going, it's most of the big companies, most of the big development partners are able to get it. And once they get it, the intermediation cost also may mean that some of these fundings may not get to us. And then at times, women organizations may not have the kind of profile that is needed, the kind of what I call the fiduciary standards needed to access some of this funding. So once we have a big organization is able to get it for us, then we can distribute it and get a lot of women to benefit from the climate finance on the ground. So we'll be moving forward with this very much this year, and Lagos State Ministry of Environment is really our partner, and we are not also working alone with the Ministry of Environment. We are also working with the Lagos State Ministry of Health also to see how we can work with them to build a resilient health system that works for the people and especially for the women. And how do we ensure that some of these funds come really, really down to the grassroots? So that is very, very important for us. Yes, we want to turn our vulnerability to economic opportunities. And then again, there are a few things, recommendations we are giving to Lagos State. At the initial stage, Lagos State has done some background work on research, climate change research and gender. And over the years, we have not have an updated research to help us determine where we are and where we also need to go in the future. So we need to do an update on that research. And we're also saying that the new climate action that is on the time now, that women also must benefit from that climate action, the new climate action that is also launched recently. And for us as women, that is what we are asking for, and that is the difference we want to make here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So vulnerability to economic benefits. Thank you so much. Do we have questions? We'll take one or two questions before we round up. Well, looks like the questions have all been answered some way. So we'll just quickly go. Oh, yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to the panelists. I understand that we are pressed for time. So it's just a quick few contributions, observing all that we have done from yesterday, and of course, going forward for Lagos. I want to say that Lagos State's bringing this back is very important. We are grateful, but a lot of things need to be done, especially talking about infrastructure. It's not only government that is involved in infrastructure. So one of the things that Lagos State need to do, which have been recommended in the previous climate change summit of Lagos, is that Lagos is a city-state. Lagos should have its own standard organization, agency. It is important because a lot of setback that we have in trying to change attitude, in trying to retrofit, in trying to get people to be sustainable, is hindered and jeopardized by substandard materials. So that's one thing that I think Hope should go into the communique. Another thing is that Lagos State needs to find the confidence to make bold investments in waste management again. The last administration did it, but perhaps got it wrong. We need to find that strength to do it again. It is important. Waste management investment, if Lagos gets it right, a lot of the things that have been raised here will naturally take care of itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we still have contributions? Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, all. My name is Idewe Suku. I'm a participant of this international climate change since from the upset. I want to make a contribution to this event, because if you look around this conference since yesterday, grammars and cameras have been flowing. But today, I want to make it clear to us that we should not follow the trend of the previous one. We should try other narrative to this climate change action or environmental promotion. You see, there are a lot of actors in this environmental stuff or climate change related. Because if we don't use our individual language, we don't use acts, the youth, the children will not be involved. Because you see the same face, the same set of people that are participating in the same conference. What are we taking back home? How are we promoting the environment to others so that they can engage themselves in it? I want to give you a typical example of what is trending. Look at BB Nigeria today. The youth are more interested in such program because they utilize many myths to captivate the youth. The youth of Nigeria today, they are interested in entertainment and sport. And that is where they lie. Why can't we go to them in this area and champion every cause of environment to them so that they can be interested? And then we can do this thing together. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective there. We have been able to come to a conclusion that climate change is with us and is not going to go away. But whatever we do, we must be able to sensitize ourselves and sensitize our communities so that we can build resilient communities, so that we can have interdependencies that are sure, that are clean, that are right. We must also involve everyone, since we are asking for inclusivity in almost every area. We're looking at the people living with disabilities. We're looking at the older persons. We're looking at refugees. We are looking at displaced persons. We are looking at migrants. And we are looking at the influx of people into Lagos. So if we consider all this, we must be very bold, to use a word I got a few minutes ago. We must be very bold and decisive in whatever we do as a people in Lagos State. And of course, we must be sensitive to the various disabilities, not physical disabilities now, social disabilities, economic disabilities. We have to be very sensitive to them. And in all, we must build adaptive capacities for everyone, whether there are disasters or there are no disasters, but that would help us, every one of us, to be able to live with the changing times. Thank you very much. And I say thank you very much to our panelists. Mr. Akpan, thank you. Dr. Lansing, thank you. Mrs. Akin, thank you. And Mr. Akosa, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much. Next is the high point of the two-day summit, which is the communique. Let me now.
All our moderators that we had to collapse, please come forward for your gifts. We appreciate you. Mrs. Dania, Tony Oshaniwa, who is the third person?
Mr. Adeoye, Mr. Oshaniwa. Mr. Aribabu Sulaiman too, okay. Thank you very much. Next is the high point, which is the communique of the two-day Lagos State 8th International Climate Change Summit. Let me now respectfully invite the Honorable Commissioner for the Environment and Water Resources. Before I invite the Honorable Commissioner, our Oga, to round up proceedings, the rapporteur, Professor Babajide Allah, will read the communique. Please, let's appreciate him.
Honorable Commissioner for Environment and Water Resources, Lagos State, the Special Advisor on Drainage for Lagos State, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as the MC has said, in our usual practice, this is the high point of the day for us to look at the communique, the output of the 2 days of JoJo and brainstorming that we have done here since yesterday. So I will quickly go through, and then but as we go through, please, if you have any corrections or interventions, just hold on to it and then note the page so you can take us back to it after we have gone through the entire script. The Lagos State 8th International Climate Change Summit communique. Preamble. The Lagos State 8th International Summit on Climate Change was held at the Lagos Continental Hotel, Victoria Island, Lagos, from 8 to 9 June, with the theme, Adapting Health, Energy, Agriculture, Transportation, and Waste Infrastructure to the long-term impacts of climate change in Lagos State. The summit had in attendance over 300 participants and stakeholders who are present physically or joined virtually, comprising top political office holders, government functionaries, members of the diplomatic community, the academia, captains of industries, traditional rulers, national and international experts on climate change, non-governmental organizations, friends of the environment, and students. Opening session. The two-day summit commenced with a welcome address delivered by the Honorable Commissioner for the Environment and Water Resources in the state, Mr. Tunji Bello, who reiterated the need for concerted efforts by all stakeholders to combat the obvious impacts of climate change across the globe and in particular Lagos State. He noted that past summits have helped in setting the agenda for the state on climate change, resulting in the development of a robust climate action plan, and commended the state governor for resuscitating the summit after a 5-year break. This was followed with goodwill messages from the Honorable Minister for Environment, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, the Consular General of Switzerland Embassy in Nigeria, His Excellency Thomas Schneider, as well as the chair of the C40 cities and mayor of Los Angeles. The summary of the Lagos Climate Action Plan was presented by the Permanent Secretary, Office of Environmental Services, Mrs. Belinda Odene, with focus on critical sectors of transportation, energy, and waste management, and how this relates to the vision for Lagos from now to 2050. This was followed with the keynote address by the governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babajide Olusola Sanwo-Olu, who acknowledged the vulnerability of Lagos to climate change impacts as a result of its unique topography, and reaffirmed the state government's commitment to tackling the challenges through the implementation of a robust climate action plan. He noted that Lagos had been in the forefront of the climate change issues in Nigeria with the implementation of various mitigation and adaptation actions, as well as engagement with various stakeholders through the annual Climate Change Summit. While recounting the successes of the past summits, which include the batting of two critical agencies, the Lagos State Parks and Gardens Agency, Lasg, and the Lagos State Water Regulatory Commission, the governor expressed the readiness of the state to create a new agency, if necessary, to address the challenges of climate change and environmental degradation in the state. He concluded by acknowledging the various state and non-state actors who have continued to support and are working towards the realization of a climate-resilient Lagos. The session ended with the presentation of the lead paper titled "The Imperative for Action to Protect Human Health from Climate Change Threats and Risks," which was delivered virtually by Dr. Karadi Wright of the South African Medical Research Council, University of Pretoria in South Africa. The paper highlighted the evidences and consequences of climate change in Africa, with emphasis on increasing global temperatures in Africa and the predictable consequences using the business as usual scenario. Plenary sessions. A total of 9 plenary sessions were held with paper presentation. The 9 plenary sessions are listed in the communique. Breakout sessions. A total of 14 breakout sessions were held with focus on different sectors. The presentations at the breakout sessions are again listed as it was in the program which you have. Observations now. The summit made various observations, including but not limited to the following. 1, that the business as usual will stimulate steady rise in temperature globally. The consequence for Lagos State could be between 3 degrees centigrade in 2063 and 6 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. 2, climate change threatens human health, well-being, and causes socioeconomic disruptions through exposure to extreme weather events, and is expected to cause an additional 250,000 deaths every year by 2030. Number 3, poor communities are the most affected by the negative effects of climate change, contributing to increases in climate-sensitive diseases, air pollution disease, and decreases in access to safe water. Number 5, loss of biodiversity has significant long-term domino effect on human health. Number 5, increasing temperatures and change in precipitation patterns, impacts of habitats distribution, and mating cycles of disease-carrying vectors. Number 6 now, no single sector can alone solve the complex health challenges of climate change. There is, therefore, the need for a multi-sectoral collaboration and synergy. Number 7, the loss of habitat and biodiversity distorts the natural order of nature and makes man more vulnerable to the emerging infectious diseases, EIDs. Number 8, climate change threatens agricultural yield in sub-Saharan Africa, including Lagos, which could be further reduced by up to 50% by 2030, putting millions of people at risk of food insecurity and malnutrition. Number 9, Lagos State 5-year Agricultural and Food Systems Roadmap that has just been launched has a momentum to drive agricultural investment and commercialization in the state. Number 10, climate change has continued to affect agricultural production, ranging from crop yield to animal husbandry, resulting in shrinking food supplies, particularly in food insecure developing areas. Number 11, climate change is contributing to decreased productivity and dieback of trees from drought and temperature moisture stress. Number 12, various fish species are already migrating poleward, resulting in the rapid tropicalization of mid and high latitude systems, with serious concern for a large-scale distribution of global marine fish catch potential is forecast. Observation 13, investment in buildings and other infrastructures are increasingly at risk due to changing climate conditions and related extreme weather events. Number 14, considerations for resilience to climate change and extreme weather conditions are paramount in the design and construction of buildings and other critical infrastructure. 15, current road networks in Lagos State is inadequate to meet the rising expectations of current and future demands for road transportation. Number 16, Lagos currently has 226 cars per kilometer of road, compared to the national average of 16 cars per kilometer, and more than 12 million passengers are moved by public transport per day. Number 17, increase in population and socioeconomic activities has resulted in longer commuting period, which in turn contributes to a rise in greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. Number 18, traffic congestion is estimated to cost the state's economy about $7.5 million USD daily in lost productivity. Observation 19, greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector in Lagos State could rise to 2 million tons per year in 2030 if the sector is left to continue with business as usual scenarios without serious mitigation efforts. Number 20, the future of Lagos lies in the aggressive implementation of Smart City Initiative. And number 21, the lack of sustainable commercial plan, financing and pertinent market penetration strategy is affecting a low market penetration for LPG usage. There is presently no framework for assessing climate finance in the state. Number 23, women are often disproportionately more negatively affected by the impacts of climate change because of poor social and economic configurations of the society. And finally, observation 24, women are susceptible to some of the hardest impacts of climate change consequences such as gender and sexual-based abuses and violence. Finally, the recommendations. The summit made the following recommendations. Number 1, the state government should establish a standing interministerial technical committee on climate change with relevant NGOs and private sector to develop strategies for implementing the newly launched Climate Action Plan of the state and give regular advice to the state government on the CAP. Recommendation 2, Lagos State should incorporate resilience to long-term impacts of climate change in the design and construction of buildings and critical infrastructure. Recommendation 3, the state should make infrastructure more climate resilient going forward through retrofitting and implementation of regular maintenance regimes. Recommendation 4, the state should vigorously pursue the implementation of the state's Strategic Transport Master Plan, the STMP, to address transportation challenges in the state and reduce GHG emissions emanating from the sector. Recommendation 5, the state government should pursue the aggressive implementation of a climate-resilient smart city initiative. Recommendation 6, the state government should put in place plans of action to support farmers in adopting climate-resilient agricultural practices. Recommendation 7, the state should put in place mechanisms for improved collaboration with other states to attain and sustain food security for the citizens of the state. Recommendation 8, Lagos State should promote climate-smart and eco-friendly agricultural practices and promote zero waste, as well as explore the potential for bioenergy generation. Recommendation 9, mechanisms to encourage the use of LPG to reduce reliance on coal and firewood by low-income groups of the society should be established. Recommendation 10, the state should develop a framework for the introduction of green sources of energy into its infrastructure development. Recommendation 11, the state government, through the Ministry of Information and Strategy and its agencies, should commence advocacy on safety issues around LPG use across its value chain. Recommendation 12, the state should improve surveillance through human, animal, and environmental monitoring with a view to promoting health and preventing disease. And recommendation 13, the state government should take advantage of the human capacity available within the 2 universities in Lagos to support research and innovation to generate new evidence and or tools for health and to validate existing knowledge. Recommendation 14, investments in continuous training of human infrastructure and organizational capacity to address the challenges of emerging infectious diseases should be increased and sustained. And recommendation 15, the state government should raise a forum to discuss rural-urban drift in the state's environment and infrastructure, to discuss the effects of rural-urban drift on the state environment and infrastructure. The state government should put in place, that's recommendation 16 now, the state government should put in place appropriate framework for assessing climate finance, utilizing the direct and indirect strategies for raising climate capital. Recommendation 17, the state government should consider the establishment of a climate change foundation that will include public and private sector stakeholders. And recommendation 18, the state government should review and expand the scope of her women empowerment initiatives to reach more women, particularly those in rural communities. And recommendation 19, Lagos State should, as part of her affirmative action, implement gender-based initiatives targeted at empowering women to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, acknowledgement. Participants at the summit commend the Lagos State government and the State Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources for resuscitating the Lagos International Climate Change Summit with the hosting of the 8th edition. Specifically, the summit acknowledged the visionary leadership of the Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babajide Olusola Sanwo-Olu, as demonstrated in his commitment to the protection of the state environment and support for the summit. Participants also acknowledged the efforts of the Honorable Commissioner for the Environment and Water Resources, Mr. Tunji Bello, and the entire management and staff of the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources in ensuring a successful hosting of the summit. This is a draft communique. Ladies and gentlemen, Thank you very much. I take this loud applause as evidence that the room is endorsing the communique. But be that as it may, if there is anyone that has any correction, addition, please indicate. I see one hand up, and can you give him the microphone? Mr. Sulaiman Arigbabu's hand is up. And I hope it's not this your last intervention you expect will be captured.
Thank you. Beautiful communique, sir. Recommendation 13.
13.
Specifically said the two universities.
Yes.
I think the polytechnics are equally important. So I think we should just mention relevant institutions. Because we have Yabatech participating here. We have Laspotech. So that recommendation is a bit excluding.
It's not inclusive.
It's not inclusive.
So you are suggesting that the human capacity available within the tertiary institutions in the state.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other? I see another hand up here. Yes. I think that must be Folawemi, right?
Yes, sir. Well done, Professor Alo, and this has been a 2-day wonderful, intense, and insightful sessions. I'd like to add that as we go ahead in all the things that we want to do, there should be metrics for measuring success or otherwise.
Metrics for measuring success.
Yeah, there should be timelines of a year, whatever, quarterly, anything, so that we know that we are getting to where we want to get to, what we need to adjust, and things on the way. This is my addition, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. We probably will capture that under observations. Any other requests for the floor? Any other hand up? I don't see. Oh, there is one hand. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We need to add more flesh to the climate action plan. The plan is fantastic. There are many fine statements, but now we need to have a strategy. How do we do this, and when do we do it? And this is how we're going to track that we're doing it. So that plan needs to be followed up by a climate action strategy that is actually specific as to sector to sector. This is what we're doing. Area to area, this is what we're doing. And these are the timelines that we're going to do them.
Thank you. You probably missed out recommendation 1. That is the very first recommendation in the communique. It says, do I read it to you so you can capture
Yes, sir,
it?
please do.
Recommendation 1 says, are you still with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The state government should establish a standing interministerial technical committee on climate change with relevant NGOs and private sector to develop strategies for implementing the Climate Action Plan, CAP of the state, and give regular advice to the state government on the CAP, sector by sector. So what your intervention now is simply advising that we should put sector by sector in that recommendation 1. Would you be satisfied with that? Thank you very much. Any other requests for the floor? I don't see any request. So at this juncture, can someone please just stand up and say he moves the communique as to be adopted as the output from the meeting? Anyone who feels so persuaded? I see one hand up there. Maybe that is the city.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy that the COMTA has come to become. And without much ado, I want to move the motion that this communique be adopted by everybody here present for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maximus Ugoke, the C40 lead for Nigeria, the Lagos City advisor. Anybody seconding that or is taking that? Everybody is, I see a hand behind there, somebody who hasn't spoken before. Yes. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Remy George Ashiru. I'd like to second this motion for the adoption of the communique.
Thank you very much. Remy Ashiru, you said? Sorry?
Remy George Ashiru.
Oh, Remy George Ashiru. Thank you very much. And your affiliation is so we can...
Ministry of the Environment.
Thank you very much. So at this juncture, the communique stands adopted as presented. Thank you very much. And we will now simply be inviting our Honorable Commissioner, our Chief Host, to close us.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof. I don't know how to round up, but I just feel elated, really. And I think the first thing we need to do is, first of all, acknowledge and thank everyone since yesterday, from our governor to all our resource persons, to all the participants, and to all the visitors, all the attendees. I think everybody deserves a round of applause, please. It's been 5 years of absence, and we are very delighted to be back, and we are back with a bang. The last 2 days have been very, very encouraging, very innovative. We have had a lot of interesting presentations, and we've also had a lot of challenging comments, which I think we must really examine. And I want to take off from the recommendations, first recommendation that was read in the communique on the climate action plan, as well as the other committees that is proposed to be set up. I think our next summit, really, based on discussion with some of our, able resource persons, is that next year, I think we must start with the review of our action plan. What have we really done with all the recommendations that have been made and so on, so that it won't be just come here to come and talk and blow grammar, and then at the end of the day, we hold another summit, and then no action plan. So from next year, it's going to be very, very interesting and very challenging. We should be able to challenge the government. What have you done? What have you really done in some of the recommendations that have been made so far? So we promise you that, and by God's grace, we are going to implement. We are going to start with that. So, all in all, I can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful. You've all been, I'll say all of you have been wonderful. You've been very supportive, and we've all participated so fully. There's no other way to commend you but to say thank you and thank you. And may God bless you all. Once again, till we meet next year, God bless you all. Thank you.
Let's have a group photograph with our overall boss in the environment and water resources. The committee. Yeah, I know.
You're welcome. Over to me, Rasta messenger. No problem. Lagos jump. Lagos jumping. Lagos jump. Lagos jamming. Kase from Ife. She was jamming in her bronze and her silver.
Malia. Ta ló sọ pé kò fọ̀kẹ́? OPP ó pọ̀pá, OPG ó pọ̀gan. Ta ló sọ pé kò fọ̀kẹ́? OPP ó pọ̀pá, OPG ó pọ̀gan. Àwọn ọmọ ají ló mọ́tò, ají bàbá yá, àwọn ọmọ mi ṣokoṣoko. Àwọn ọmọ ají ló mọ́tò, ají bàbá yá, àwọn ọmọ mi ṣokoṣoko. Let's talk about pocket. OPP your papa, OPG your papa. Let's talk about pocket. OPP your papa, OPG your papa.
Tẹ́lẹ̀tẹ́lẹ̀ la máa ń fọ́ fún wọn wípé kò má wà lóru torí pé àwa ti jáde àmọ́ nísìnyí tó bá wà lọ́sàn tó bá wà lóru àwa ń bẹ nígbẹ́ àwòdẹ̀ lè fọ́ fún wọn torí pé àwa ń tí ń gàṣà àwòdẹ̀ lè sá fún wọn. Ayé yóò lé o, ayé yóò lé, ayé ló máa yé lé, ayé ló máa yé lé.
Friday, party after party, party, 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 party after party. After party, àwọn kan ṣàgbó after party, àwọn kan mújẹ after party, àwọn kan gbọ́mọ after party. You better, oh your baby, oh your bobo ṣáàtì, oh your baby. Oh baby, oh your bobo. Look, bomo, I'm a leg, bomo, love, based on people to party. Party after party, like day after shaggy. Party after party, party.
And you, when you're buying your leather, Umbrukama, your room was shiny. Moti satellite, ni monitor the Koja, and your long fellow, me, young fellow. Ẹ máa yọ́nú sí mi. Àgbàtọ̀mọdé ẹ máa yọ́nú sí mi o. Ọkùnrin tóbìnrin ẹ yọ́nú sí mi. Ẹni bá yọ́nú sí mi. Ṣọ́jú ìyọ́nú Ọlọ́run ọba. Ìyọ́nú Ọlọ́run ọba. Ìyọ́nú Ọlọ́run ọba. Ìyọ́nú Ọlọ́run ọba. Ìyọ́nú Ọlọ́run ọba òun lẹ́ ó máa rí. Ẹ máa yọ́nú sí mi, ọkùnrin ẹ yọ́nú sí mi, obìnrin ẹ yọ́nú sí mi, gbogbo ẹni bá yọ́nú sí mi o.